Hey YouTube, it's Robert, and in today's video we're going to talk about laminate flooring, and I'm going to give you all of the basic things that you need to go out and confidently shop for laminate flooring. We're going to look at a lot of considerations that relate to both the performance and the aesthetics of the products so that you make the best decision possible for your specific project. I'm not here to endorse any specific brands, and I'm not being paid by any brands to talk about their product in this video. I just want to equip you with all the things that you're going to need to go out and buy the right quality product and know what it is that you should be looking for when you're shopping for laminate flooring in your area. So when we're talking about laminate flooring, we're talking about products that are generally comprised of an HDF core. That stands for high density fiber. So they're wood fibers that are bonded together to create this core. And then there's layers that are put on top to give it the image, the texture, and finally layers of finish to protect the surface from things like scratches and stains. And these products can also have an attached backing, generally made of some type of a foam that's designed to help with the sound absorption, as well as a little bit of the impact absorption for a floor category that's generally done in a floating installation method. So we'll start by talking about some of the elements that really drive how these products will perform and hold up in your home, and then we'll jump into the aesthetics after that. So when we start comparing different laminate products together in terms of quality, one of the first and easiest ways for us to start differentiating products is based off how thick the laminate is. And here you can see we have a great example of two different laminate floors. The one on the right is 8 millimeters thick, and the one on the left is 12 millimeters thick with a 1 millimeter thick attached underlayment. So that number represents the total thickness of the board from the top to the bottom. And there are products that will fall a little bit outside of that range. There's products out there that are about as thin as 6 millimeters, and some products that are even a little bit more than 12 millimeters. But the majority of products are going to fall in that 8 to 12 millimeter range. Now, a thicker board is not necessarily a better product than a thinner board. It will tend to feel a little bit sturdier, and it may even be a little bit quieter underfoot because of the sheer weight of the thicker board, but it doesn't mean that it's going to perform better in terms of scratch resistance, which is determined by the wear layer. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be more water resistant or even more impact resistant, because the overall density and the construction of those cores can vary wildly. So we can have a product that's thicker that still doesn't have as dense of an overall makeup as a thinner product. So we need to look at all of these things in totality and compare them not just on one feature, but on all the features together as a whole, and based off of what the manufacturer is telling us to expect from the product from their warranties. Thicker floors will also tend to lend themselves towards the longer planks because we're trying to eliminate any flex that comes with making longer boards, and they're going to be a little bit more structurally sturdy for that format. One other thing to really consider when it comes to the thickness of your product is what you might be transitioning to in your home in terms of other flooring or even things like door casings. So we want to make sure that we're aware of the impact of a thinner or thicker floor on how it's going to meet up against those other areas, and whether we might need a T-molding or a reducer, or we need to accommodate any differential in the height as we move on to those other floor surfaces. And in terms of the surface of the product, we're going to be looking for the abrasion class rating, or AC rating, that you see here. This product over here is an AC4 rating. Now, AC class can range from an AC1 to an AC5, or in rare instances, I've heard of AC6s. However, the vast majority of the products are going to fall in an AC3 to AC4 range when we're talking about residential products. Now, we can see that the actual thickness of this floor is 10 millimeters thick, and it has an AC4 rating. And here we have an 8 millimeter thick product that actually has a 2 millimeter attached pad and a AC rating of 4. So the thickness of the product will have nothing to do with the actual abrasion class rating that the surface is given. And an AC4 wear rating product is generally going to give us a limited lifetime residential warranty as well as a light to medium commercial warranty. However, with all warranties, you really need to read the fine print, because a limited lifetime residential warranty may not include use in a rental. It may not be transferable to a new owner. So things like that, you'll want to verify if you have specific circumstances that you're trying to make sure are covered under your warranty. So that abrasion class rating is going to be great for helping to determine how resistant the surface is to abrasion and scratches from things like pets or things that we traffic in on our feet, in the bottom of our shoes. However, it's not going to give us a warranty on things like gouging the floor from trying to drag heavy pieces of furniture or other things that would fall under the category of abuse or non-wear related things and more damage from improper care.
Now, the next major topic of conversation around laminate flooring is generally what type of water resistance and stain resistance it offers. And different manufacturers will have different treatments to protect the surfaces of their floors, but we can typically get a pretty good general idea of what to expect from the floor by reviewing the manufacturer's warranties as well as their care and maintenance instructions. One example of this would be Wet Protect from Mohawk Flooring, and the Wet Protect is achieved through the combination of the Uniclick locking system as well as a topical sealant that's applied to the edges of the planks. This completely locks out all spills from being able to absorb through the joints of the floor. However, when we look at the waterproof warranties and protection that the manufacturers are touting, it's really important to note that the product itself may not achieve all of that, and some of it may be achieved only through a specific installation system. And again, I received no compensation from Mohawk to talk about their product.
So just as important as what's protecting the top of our floor is what's protecting the underside of our floor. And with laminate being a floating installation, we need something underneath it that's going to serve a few different purposes. The first being protecting it from any moisture that's coming up through our subfloor. So that's where we need, at a bare minimum, a 6mm plastic that we can put underneath the floor to prohibit any of that moisture from rising up into our floor and forcing it somewhere else. Now, there's going to be other products that you'll see in rolls like this that will not only protect from the moisture, but will also serve to make the floor a little bit more comfortable and also to quiet the floor. So in this particular floor, you can see on one side we have the moisture protection, and on the other side we have the foam element for absorbing the sound and giving the floor a little bit more cushion. So if you have specific concerns about the type of underlayment, because either it's a requirement if you're in a multi-family type of a scenario or a high-rise type of scenario, or you just want to make sure that you have the quietest floor that you can get, you'll want to refer to two different rating systems. One is called STC and one is called IIC. These are the sound transmission class rating and the impact isolation class rating. And the biggest way that I can explain those is they measure both the sound that is made when you actually impact the floor as well as its effect on the surrounding areas around you and below you. So now let's move on to the aesthetics of laminates and what we get when we move from good to better and best in terms of the looks of these floors. And if you're finding this information valuable and you haven't yet, please hit that thumbs up button for me real quick and let's keep going. With some of our older laminates and even some of our entry-level products of today, we're gonna have a lot of products like this that are one board with the appearance of multiple planks on them. Now the issue with that is when this board ends, all of those images will end side by side. And in wood, we typically don't see that. We almost always see the staggering of the planks. So there's very rare cases with wood where we would have planks actually end side by side at the same spot. So that's a little bit more of a giveaway that we're looking at a laminate floor than when we're dealing with a product that has the image of one plank on one board. Another thing that we're gonna see huge differences in is how well they actually marry the texture of the product to the image of the product. So on some of our more entry-level products, we're gonna see a texture applied to the surface, but it's not going to have really any alignment with the visual of the grain, of the knots, of any of the characteristics that we see in the product. It'll just be more randomly applied across the surface of that board. However, when we start moving into some of our more mid-grade and high-end products, we're gonna get better and better texturization into the surface layer where our knots, our grain, all of the images that we see are actually gonna have texture that matches up with those images. It looks pretty impressive close up, but it makes an even bigger difference when we look at these floors from a distance. Now, another thing that I've talked about in a few of the other videos that I've done is the edge details of these products. We have a variety of different types of edges on these, from a square edge where the products just meet up and there's almost no break from one plank to the next. And then we have products that give us more of a pillowed edge or a beveled edge profile. And that helps to distinguish one plank from another a little bit more significantly. However, the way that manufacturers are able to create these edges can vary greatly. So in some of our lower end, middle grade products, we'll have a beveled edge, we'll have a pillowed edge, but we won't have the continued image all the way into those edges. They'll have to stop with the actual printing technology they have and then apply more of a solid color or unfinished type of bevel into those products. Now, with some of our higher end products, they have technologies that allow them to print all the way into the edges of their floors so that it looks more like a natural wood. We would actually see the grain carry all the way over into those pillowed or beveled edges. And when you start to look at a variety of different products wherever you happen to be shopping, those are things that you'll really start to pick up on when you know what to look for. Another consideration that will really impact the final look of your floor is the width and the length of the individual boards. So the trend lately has been to go both wider and longer with boards, and that would generally mean somewhere in about the 7.5 to 9 inches on the width and generally about 6 to 7 foot on the length. And there are a lot of great products that are 4 foot long, but one of the things that you'll start to see as you move up into the higher end products is they'll start to push those lengths to 60, 72, and even 84 inches in length. And those products can work in a variety of rooms, but where they really shine is using those bigger and wider planks in large, wide open spaces. Another topic that comes up a lot is the actual pattern repeat. So when we talk about the pattern repeat, we're talking about how often do we see the same image from one plank come up again on another plank. And with the laminates being a man-made product and they're using a printing technology to actually print on these, there's always going to be a repeat at some point. But the manufacturers vary widely in how many actual patterns that they implement. And as we pay for a more expensive product, that's one of the things that we're generally looking to get. Along with more of a realistic visual on each plank is a more realistic floor overall that gives more of a natural variation we would expect from real wood. So one of the things I get asked a lot is how many repeats are there in a particular product? And the manufacturers can be really misleading in how they present that, because how they actually categorize a repeat can be very different from one manufacturer to another. In some instances, it means you don't see any repeat of a single characteristic on that plank. But in most cases, it means that we don't see the exact same knot in the exact same place. And if it's moved to a different part of the board, that would be counted as a different product and not considered a repeat in the pattern. This can be really frustrating when you think that you have a product that's going to give you 30 unique planks. You open up a box and you see the same knot in 3 planks out of 6 from that box. And here's a couple great examples of what I'm talking about. This first one, we have 2 planks that meet end to end. Here you can see the joint. And this knot visual here is a complete repeat. But we have an instance where this knot is on the left end of one board and on the right end of another board. So it's in a different location, and the manufacturer would actually consider that 2 different planks. Now, almost inevitably, we're going to end up with the patterns repeating on our floor somewhere, and we'll likely end up with areas where we see those happen relatively close to each other. Now, the more vivid the pattern, the more it's going to jump out at us. So when we have very defined visuals like some of the knots and the cracks, they're going to draw our attention to them more when they repeat than when we have a product that seems a little bit more uniform overall, and we'll be less likely to notice where those exact pattern repeats happen. Another thing that can really vary from one manufacturer to another is what type of trim moldings that they offer for things like your T moldings, your N moldings, reducers, and probably most commonly stair noses. Now, more and more products are being offered that give us an entire tread or at least a stair nose that can go over an existing stair without having to actually modify the box of your subfloor. Now, our company has for years been making custom stair noses that allow us to just slide the stair nose right over the tread once we remove the old flooring and not really have to modify that box. And we do that by actually milling the planks themselves into stair noses. So we also get a perfect match. However, more and more of the manufacturers are starting to offer those where they're making them and shipping them directly to you, completely ready for install. So not all manufacturers are offering that yet. If you're looking to do stairs, then I highly recommend that be one of the first considerations that you have, so you don't fall in love with the product only to find out later that it doesn't really fit for the type of install that you want to do. I'm not going to spend much time on the color or the species that some of these products mimic. However, I will say that there's just about something for everybody out there. And although right now what's trending tends to be a little bit on the lighter side, more of the natural European oak looks, there's also products that mimic everything from walnut to hickory to maple. And there are products out there that mimic tile and stone looks. However, they're not nearly as common, and I would say that there's far less options available than the products that mimic wood. So that should address the majority of the common considerations that you should have when purchasing laminate flooring. If you have a specific question that I didn't address in this video, please just drop it down in the comments below and I'll try to answer it there. If you found this video helpful, you could just hit that like button for me. That's a huge help and it takes no time to do. And I would certainly love for you to consider subscribing to my channel if you'd like to see more videos from me in the future. My name's Robert. I'm here to help with all your home and remodel related needs. So until next time, happy remodeling and have a great day.